We're going to be talking about Richard Wagner's influence on film. The influence is immense here. Why are we going to talk about Wagner in film? Well, we know that Wagner's music often is used in film, but that's not really the subject of the talk. Some of the movies that have used Wagner, some of the ways people know Wagner, you'll see the examples here. We have Birth of the Nation. We have Charlie Chaplin, the great dictator. We have the famous What's Up, Doc? Kill the Wabbit, Apocalypse Now, Excalibur, and a fairly recent movie, The New World, starring Christopher Plummer, story of Jamestown using the Rheingold prelude. But going back to Wagner in film, why do we talk? Well, Wagner worked in a theater very similar to today's movie house. You may recognize his very own theater. Bayreuth is a whole lot like a movie house. You go into it, and unlike the opera houses of the time, you have what we would now call stadium seating here. Where is the orchestra? Where do you hear the sound from? Well, you don't see an orchestra. You hear sound. Famously, the orchestra is hidden in Bayreuth. And then what do you look at? You're in a darkened theater. That wasn't the norm before Wagner here. And you essentially see an image, a framed image here. We would call it the screen. And Wagner's famous critic, Edward Hanslick, described the Bayreuth Theater as being a bright colored picture in a dark frame. Sounds a lot like a movie, actually, a modern day movie here. Well, Wagner uses, or what film uses, is it contains a lot of elements of what Wagner wrote, what he wanted to do in his music dramas here. We have continuous melody, we have unusual instruments for effect, and most importantly, the music is based using what we now call leitmotifs. We're going to talk about those more in a bit. But what good film music really has is there'll be themes, there'll be development. You'll listen to those themes, and it's really an essential part of the movie. And it's the power of the movies, I think, because you could watch something um, on on stage, but you can go to a movie, you can see it. The camera can move you back and forth. It can pull in a lot of effects. A film by itself tells a story differently than a play, certainly by anything written here. And it's a Gesamtkunstwerk, the complete work of art, in the sense that the music is there, and the music can be not just background music, but adding to the story, telling the story. And that's what we're going to talk about. That's what Wagner theorized about quite a bit, brought it into practice, and it is practiced in the movies today. So it tells the story, it adds insight here. There's a huge amount of film music out there too, and what's fascinating about this, it is the concert music that people listen to. And I think film music is very, very much influenced by Wagner. We will talk about that influence. And because we, as Wagnerians, as opera fans, probably know our classical music pretty well, I think our ears are even more receptive to better film music. I often teach film music, and I use classes, the title of my classes are typically listening to movies. And the idea is that the music is there not as background. It's a very important part of the movie-going experience. It's good movies here. And usually what I'm doing is trying to convince people, if you like film music, you may like concert music. Well, you're probably a group. If you like concert music, opera music, you should like film music. So we'll try to make that link here. One person who's a fan of film music, you may know him, Alec Ross, a New Yorker critic, knows his Wagner very well, knows his film very, very well. Here's a 2020 article he wrote, How Wagner Shaped Hollywood. And that's, as the title suggests, is going to talk some of Wagner's influence. But what it also does talk about, it's going to give you many examples where Wagner's music is used in film for those who are interested. It's a lot of usage. One of the great film composers, I think we all know him, John Williams, who just turned 93, had a piano concerto premiered at Tanglewood. Here he's about 10 years ago. He received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the American Film Institute. And this is the first time a film composer received it after nearly 40 years of existence of the award. But you'll see what he says about film.
First of all, What an amazing evening this is. There certainly are no adequate thanks for AFI and to all of you for coming tonight. When Sir Howard rang me about this event, my first thought was, actually, I'm really much too young for a thing like this. I am very happy to be here tonight as the first composer honoree, and I can think of many deserving colleagues in the past who would have certainly been wonderful candidates for this. I owe a great deal to these men, and I owe a great deal to film, certainly. Music is like architecture, sculpture, and so on, thousands of years old. And film is the new kid on the block, 100 years barely. And though we will watch its evolution carefully, side by side with the art of music, I am enormously grateful, as all composers are, to film for giving us the broadest possible audience worldwide that any composer has ever enjoyed. I'm certain that Beethoven would have shunned it, but Wagner would have had his own studio out there in Burbank with a huge water tank with a W on it.
So John Williams is telling us film is relatively new. It's developing. It reaches a huge number of people, gives composers a chance for music to be heard. I'm going to compare that to, most composers of concert hall music, modern concert hall music. And he cites Beethoven, but he cites Wagner, saying if Wagner were there, perhaps like Bayreuth, he'd have his own studio. And Wagner and film are very linked. His grandson Wolfgang said that if Richard Wagner was alive, he would be writing film music. And I think there's something to be said for that. Wagner's not alive, but people are writing using Wagnerian type music or Wagnerian principles. So leitmotifs, it's worth talking a bit about them here. What are they? Very commonly used term, leading motive. And the dictionary definition that I found, Merriam-Webster, an associated melodic phrase, a figure that accompanies the reappearance of an idea, person, or situation, especially in a Wagnerian music drama. I don't particularly like that definition. It's the idea, it's a musical figure that accompanies the reappearance. Debussy famously said something to the effect that leitmotifs were musical calling cards. Character comes out, somebody sings something, you hear a piece of music, push the button. It's much, much more than that, plainly. Wagner did invent the word leitmotif. It actually goes back, I believe, to 1860, another author. Other people had used leitmotif before Wagner, but Wagner's name is, of course, associated with the idea of leitmotifs. Wagner's writing is hard to follow on it. He didn't like leitmotif. As far as I know, he only used the term once, and it was rather dismissively the so-called leitmotifs in an article, I believe, 1879. But in his writings, what he talked about was using music, relatively short phrases, that would be melodic moments of memory, and signposts for the emotions. So you would hear music. You would hear, if you would, references attached to, going back to that first definition, ideas, persons, situations. And they would bring up a memory, and with that memory, there might be emotion attached to it. And what Wagner did famously is pull these together, layer them. You can think of something like the end of Götterdämmerung, multiple leitmotifs pulling the drama together. And in a large opera, and we'll also see in large movies, leitmotif has these sorts of themes really help unify the movies. It tells you characters, what they're thinking, who they are, etc. So, a couple of books I'm going to mention related to leitmotifs. One is a book, very academic book, Understanding the Leitmotif, the History, but it makes an interesting point. The history of leitmotif from Wagner to film music, it actually goes back before Wagner. But it essentially makes a very, very good point that leitmotif is not just simply melody. It can also be instrumentation, it can be rhythm, it can be harmony, the things that you will hear, consciously or otherwise, that will be a reference that will let you respond emotionally, intellectually, to what is in the music. And again, Gesamtkunstwerk, you put the music with what's on the screen, it really adds another dimension. There's also an absolutely wonderful, wonderful new book written by people in the Wagner Society know him well, Jeffrey Swan, but the music of the Ring, a comprehensive study of the leitmotifs in the Ring and how they are used. And it's a catalog, well worth reading. It has a wonderful introduction, though, a wonderful afterword that discuss some of the principles of leitmotif. What are they? Jeffrey plainly has thought about them. And a couple things that Jeffrey says, I'd like to just bring to attention. I was reading through this book and I'm going, Lord, he's discussing film. Um, it's the idea that the leitmotif takes on an associative meaning to the listener that connects the music with the elements of the drama, characters, etc. here. Well, again, it that's kind of like the first definition of the dictionary by itself. It has a meaning to you. It's going to take you back to something. You're going to hear it and you're going to respond to it. You're going to know what's going on here. But what he then goes on to say, as you listen to these themes that come in, we remember what we've heard before and we compare it to what we hear now. And I think we're really beginning to get at what leitmotifs do. They come in, they're telling a story, they're giving us references which we react to. And we, may be hearing music from the past and we're beginning to think, oh, that's a much happier time or something is changing. We can also have leitmotifs that are anticipation. You certainly get that in Wagner, typically the ends of the first three operas of the Ring, Rheingold, Valkyrie, and Siegfried, all have a premonition of what's coming here. And again, that moment of memory, if we will call from Wagner. But what Jeffrey then points out, and it's a very, very good point. People say, well, leitmotif sounds very complicated. Did Wagner really have this elaborate scheme, etc.? I think he did a lot of it intuitively. But what does Jeffrey say? This continuous memory process may be conscious and analytical, or on the other hand, completely subliminal. But it is what gives structure and meaning to every piece of music, from the simplest to the complex. So we're making these connections, these references. We're feeling emotion. You could watch the movie without music. Well and good. You could watch the opera, I suppose, without music, see what's going on in the stage. But the music is really another voice. It's telling the story alongside what you see on the screen. And of course, there's scenes in movies that really have very little dialogue, but many you hear the music to other scenes, to earlier in the movie, to characters, etc. Again, the themes are telling the story, and they may be changed in terms of rhythm, harmony, instrumentation, etc. But all the different ways that these themes can be used. Well, I'm going to give you a great example, what I hope is a great example to you. So, an example of where it's memory and participation. This is the movie The Godfather, Godfather 2. The whole Godfather series is about memory here. People looking back, some looking forward too. And the orchestra tells a story. And there's some very, very good themes that you've heard over and over again, differently presented throughout. But one theme that you hear, kind of a pleasant theme, it actually starts in Italy. It's family life. It's kind of it is an upbeat theme, quite delightful theme of Godfather too, actually. But then there's also the theme of the Godfather, Al Pacino, which is a rather malevolent sound, and it gets darker and darker at various points. And here we are. What's really wonderful in this, we are at a funeral. It's the mother of several of the brothers here, mother of the Godfather, Al Pacino, and his older brother, Fredo, who has betrayed him. And Michael knows it. And he said, I'm not going to harm you while our mother is alive. Well, mother isn't alive here. And for the first time in some period of time, he comes up to his brother, and you hear this family music, which has a rather warm sound to it, warm attachments here. And he gives his brother a hug. And maybe you think the brother is forgiven here, but as he is hugging his brother, you hear the malevolent sound of the Godfather, the killer, the man who puts people to death. And there's a brief nod to another man who is going to be the assassin who killed the brother. But it's all in the music here. And you've been hearing this music and you react to both of them. You may be a little bit hopeful as you hear one theme, but then it's pretty clear what's happening and you're left very, very unsettled too. It's just a great scene. from a great movie. Very chilling music. I'm going to brighten this up a little bit. We're not going to hear Al Jolson singing to his mother here, but I want to make the point, early film music. We had been hearing music in silent films, partly to cover the projector, and typically it didn't have original music. There was sheets you could play, the woman, fear music, whatever else you want. Sometimes pianists would play what they knew. Wagner was actually very popular. Here's some of the themes. Sometimes films would have an orchestral score, the big theaters, or a piano, but mostly it was pretty free form what would play. While sound came into the movies, famously in The Jazz Singer, Al Jolson is going to sing to his mother. This is otherwise a silent movie. It's a really weird movie because after he sings to his mother, what do you hear? The theme from Romeo and Juliet. Why do you hear the Tchaikovsky? Why do you hear it? Well, they had an orchestra that or a recording that could play it. It really made no sense as you heard it. And in the early movies, this is going up into the early 30s, 1928. Hollywood was finding its ways, and eventually the recording process is going to change. So you can make a decent orchestral recording and combine it with what's on the film. But the first movie that actually used themes, had an orchestral score and used a theme in a very, very good way. Sound movie was made in 1931, but it's not really a sound movie. It's a silent film with music. It's, of course, Charlie Chaplin. And Chaplin, in so many ways, was a genius here. I think a lot of you know the movie City Lights. Here's a blind girl. She's a blind flower girl. She can't see. Charlie Chaplin is a tramp. But through a bit of comedy, she seems to think that he's a wealthy man and he loves her. And she, to regain her sight, he has discovered she needs an operation, which of course she can't afford. He's going to do his best to get her the money she needs for the operation to regain her sight. Well, he's managed to get the use of a car through a rich friend. He takes her back to her home, and you hear a lot of this movie is kind of a bum, 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 just kind of bumbles along for the comedy here. But you're going to hear a beautiful theme. Charlie Chaplin was a man who loved music. He had basically a fifth grade education at best. He couldn't read music, he couldn't write music, but he could hum it and other people could put it down here. So you're going to hear a little bit of music, and then Chaplin is going to, here comes the theme, is going to show his love for the girl, and she'll show his, and you're going to hear a pretty love theme. And then we're not going to hear that again until, an hour later, the end of the movie. But let's hear that love theme first. Note the flower. So we had that beautiful love theme, and now we go to what is one of the most famous moments, I think, in movies, and really one of the first times you hear the power of music, of recorded music, of a theme in films here. And the story here is Chaplin in his effort to get money for the girl ends up getting arrested. It's a side story here after much comedy, and he's returned from jail. And at this point, he had gotten the money to the girl. She has her vision back, but she doesn't know who this strange tramp is who's standing outside her flower shop, who just stumbled upon it, looks at her, and there's a scene of recognition. And again, you could do this without music, but what music do you hear? You hear music from that scene where Chaplin expresses his love for her, she for him, presumably, and she will recognize him in what is just a beautiful, beautiful scene. There's two bits of music here. One is a theme that Chaplin had been using. It's kind of a Spanish rhythm, the theme of the flower girl in general, but right away it turns to that love. And again, you could watch this scene without music, but add it in. It's really adds to it, and it is a beautiful use of a theme. I think that's certainly a moment of memory, to quote Wagner here. And also, that earlier theme was a signpost for the emotion. It told us told us something, and the payoff came in that final scene. Came quite beautifully. So that was 1931, but movies 1932, 33 really didn't have a lot of orchestral sound. The idea of writing film for the music, or writing music for the film, really, you know, wasn't being done here. But the first big film score was written by this gentleman, a Viennese gentleman named Max Steiner, and he had come to the United States via London in the 20s, basically getting away from World War II, World War One. Absolute genius. He had studied piano with Brahms. He had been, as a youngster, he had was a child prodigy, had written music, etc. He found himself in Hollywood, though. And there was a movie that had been made. It didn't, of course, didn't have an orchestra, and people watched it and they thought it was kind of silly. You may know the movie King Kong. Dialogue wasn't very, very good. People watched it and it looked like an ape going up and down, going up a cardboard version of the Empire State Building, holding a girl, etc. It's actually a pretty good movie. You could watch it without music, but what Steiner said, give me an orchestra, not a very big orchestra. It was only 45 people. Later film orchestras very quickly would become close to 80, 90, even larger. Um, as needed here. But what Steiner does is he takes this and he writes themes for King Kong, for the girl. He softens up the apes theme and essentially turns into a love theme. So in the grand finale, I think you know it. Again, you can watch this the way original audiences did, and you may say it doesn't look like much, but when you hear the music and you've watched the movie, those themes come to mind. A story is being told certainly above and beyond what's on the screen, and it actually becomes a rather tender movie. So we'll watch just a little bit of King Kong. rather amazing movie for the time. So, well, Steiner is going to go on. At this point, Hollywood films, almost everybody wants to have a musical score in the 30s and 40s, an orchestral score. And the Hollywood studios, there were about 10 of them, were blessed with very, very good composers and very, very good musicians. Many of these folks had come from Europe, escaping wartime or the coming war here. Some escaped barely with their lives, too. But Stein is going to go on. Again, he's writing well up until 1960, working. He essentially puts the themes, describes the orchestration, and then people pull the score together. And the way he would work is typically the film would be filmed, and then he would be called in. He'd see the movie, then he'd write the music. One movie that he was called in to see, you may have heard about it. I call it The Unexpected Gem. Who thought it was going to be a great movie? Just another one from the production, but a little movie called Casablanca. And Steiner watched it, and as he's watching it, he said, "Okay, I'll write the music to it." Not sure he had a choice, but I hate that song as time goes by. It was an old Broadway song, not very well known. He said, "Let me write a better song, and then I can write some great music." And they said, "Well, sorry, it's the movie's been filmed. We can't pull people back to write something new. You're just stuck with that." So stuck with it he was. But I think we all know it becomes an essential theme that we're going to hear over and over again. The characters are going to remember it. And it is Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman, Rick and Ilsa, their love theme, if you will, from the good old days in Paris. And you're going to hear that music originally at the piano. It's going to be picked up in the orchestra. It's going to change. It's going to become, tumultuous at times. It's going to go into minor keys. It will actually become, loving, affirming as we listen. But here's an example of where we hear it, one of the most famous moments in movies. And again, you could watch this without hearing these themes, this particular theme. But I think as you hear it, you are thinking back to everything you've heard, including their love and the ups and downs that they've had since we first heard it. Mostly downs, but here an up.
Just Strauss, I would insist.
You're saying this only to make me go.
I'm saying it because it's true. Inside of us, we both know you belong with Victor. You're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life.
But what about us?
We'll always have Paris. We didn't have, we lost it until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night.
When I said I would never leave you.
And you never will. But I've got a job to do, too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of.
So as time goes by. So Steiner certainly is a great Hollywood composer, one of the very first, but also in this league is Eric Wolfgang Korngold. He was a child prodigy, considered to be the new Mozart. Mahler Strauss adored him. Richard Strauss thought he was a fully formed musician. He had, wrote some very fine operas, found his way to Hollywood, basically escaped with his life here. And he essentially wrote the music of the time, the music that he probably would have written had he stayed in Vienna here. But he is writing symphonic music, just beautiful music. And these sorts of movies typically have 8 or 10 themes that are going to be laid down in the opening. There's essentially an overture where you get the credits, and then they're not really potpourri overtures so much. They can be, but you'll hear the themes. They're not giving you the plot, but you hear the basic themes, and then they will develop and they'll be used throughout. And the impact, the cumulative impact, really it becomes more impressive. I mean, go back to Steiner. I think a good example of a movie he wrote, I think you know it, Gone with the Wind, the Tara theme. And when, that will thunder out when she comes back to Tara, but really ties it together. But anyway, he is writing these big orchestral scores, of Vienna a la, 1910, 1920, bringing him to Hollywood. Just give an example in Robin Hood, just a wonderful, wonderful score. Again, laying down his themes that he will use in a 2.5-hour movie. And at this point, there's really a lot of music in these movies. I'm guessing, 60, 70% with music. sometimes filling in action scenes, sword fights, that sort of thing. But as people speak, there's going to be music underneath, just as we heard in Casablanca. So Robin Hood. Being a little slow here. And I'll stop with that. But so there you're hearing, if you will, classical music, if you will, concert hall music from the 20s, 30s, as you would have heard, Viennese orchestras, German orchestras playing at European orchestras here. But one of the composers, not everybody is going to be writing in that style, and the music is going to be changing in interesting ways by I think two of the finest composers. There are many good composers out there, but one is Franz Waxman, German composer, found his way to the United States, escaping here. One of his first movies, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and he's not writing symphonic music per se. Whereas Korngold is writing music that he can then repackage, turn into concert works. This music could be repackaged too, but he's going to take music and he's going to really set it to the particular scenes here. And what's interesting about Waxman, you listen to his music, really unusual instruments. And this is true of a lot of great film composers here. He's going to be using electronic instruments before their time, and he's dropping themes here. He's doing it as background, but this is the film Rebecca here. It's Hitchcock's first film. Here's Joan Fontaine. She is the second Mrs. De Winter. The first one, famously, is Rebecca, a woman who has died. And she has never gone into Rebecca's room. She's been told not to go there. And we've heard the theme of Rebecca, and it's always on, interestingly enough, electronic instruments. She's dead. So it all sounds a little different. And you wouldn't hear this in symphonic music. Typically the use of using electronic instruments. So the situation is set up. She's in the room. She's going to meet the terrible Mrs. Danvers. But what will happen when she gets into Rebecca's room? You will suddenly hear the theme of Rebecca. We've heard it rather quietly anytime as her name is being mentioned, but it's going to blossom out as she's again in the room, looking at it, in some ways enjoying it here. But the music, very, very uneasy as she goes into the room, eerie. What's interesting about this music, I was saying it's not really your typical concert hall music, but it actually is, because some of the people who would write this sort of music, Waxman included, Bernard Herrmann, are going to use classical music of the time. Nobody's listening to it. The music of Bela Bartok. This is going to sound a lot like Bartok. Yeah, so let's enjoy a bit of Rebecca.
you wish anything, madam? I didn't expect to see.
Now, again, you can watch this without the music, but I think the music really adds so much, particularly as, again, we're hearing the themes that we've been hearing before. Eerie, eerie, eerie. In this case, brightening up somewhat for Rebecca as we get closer to it. Well, one movie that Waxman did, he really was a versatile composer, and most of these film composers really write all styles. But a movie 75 years old, Sunset Boulevard. It's got a famous ending. I think it appeals to opera lovers here. Why? The story is Norma Desmond is a faded movie star. She's hoping to come back. She kills her lover here, or kills a man she loves. And what happens at the end? The police have arrived. She has lost her mind. And she thinks her friend, a former director, brings her, tells her to come down the steps. And where is she? She thinks she's in her next film role playing Prince Salome, or Salome, as she calls it. And as she comes down the stairs, it's all really weird, distorted music that you've heard. You're going to hear a tango because she had talked about in previously, Valentino had danced the tango at the house with her. And then at the very, very end, famous music, you're going to hear her love theme, her love for the man, very, very much distorted. And again, you could watch this without music, but you hear the themes and the tone of the music really sets it. Let's enjoy Salome.
Are you ready, Norma?
What is the scene? Where am I?
This is the staircase of the palace.
Oh, yes. Yes. Down below, they're waiting for the princess. I'm ready.
All right. Cameras. Action!
So they were turning after all. Those cameras. Life, which can be strangely merciful, had taken pity on Norma Desmond. The dream she had clung to so desperately had enfolded her.
I can't go on with the scene. I'm too happy. Mr. DeMille, do you mind if I say a few words? Thank you. I just want to tell you all how happy I am to be back in the studio, making a picture again. You don't know how much I've missed all of you. And I promise you I'll never desert you again. Because after Salome, we'll make another picture and another picture. You see, this is my life. It always will be.
The love theme.
Just us. And the cameras. And those wonderful people out there in the dark. All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Great European composer there. I want to talk about one of the best composers now, though, Bernard Herrmann, at least in my opinion here. He was born in 1911 New York City, studied NYU and Juilliard, and a lot of film composers, European or otherwise, very well trained here too. He becomes a conductor. He's working for CBS at 23. He's conducting their orchestra. Toscanini is conducting NBC, but he is working, doing radio shows famously, but also classical music, concert music coming from CBS here. And he's really interested in modern music. He's programming it in. Toscanini's doing Old War Horses by Enhart Lodge. He's doing much more conducting. Bartok, Ives, two of his favorite composers. And he's going to take the sort of music that they had. Ives is interesting. I think both related to Wagner, but Ives particularly is going to take different chords of music. He's really going to change tonality, stack things up in a way. Bernard Herrmann, famously works with Orson Welles, War of the Worlds broadcast, etc. Orson Welles is going to go to Hollywood as a 25-year-old. Bernard Herrmann's kind of the old man in the Orson Welles gang. He's about 30 for the first movie. First movie you may have heard about, something called Citizen Kane. He also works with Hitchcock. He's going to write some good films. Of course, Citizen Kane is a masterpiece of a film, masterpiece of a score, nominated for an Academy Award, doesn't win it, but then Herrmann wins one next, or one of his next movies here. Alec Ross of the New Yorker, who Alex loves film music, calls him one of the greatest of film, or calls him the greatest of film composers. And that could be. Citizen Kane, what he did, again, he's not writing, Korngold you could think of as writing music for the concert hall that he would know. Because he's worked so much in radio, he realizes music can be relatively short, it can be relatively short cues, and what you hear in radio, what you would hear in film, isn't necessarily what you hear in the concert hall. You can bring up unusual combinations of instruments that you probably would never hear in a concert hall together, and you can record them. You could have a drum playing very, very softly with a flute next to it. A concert hall, you that wouldn't work. In a movie, that would work. And Herrmann is famous for giving us um, larger numbers of instruments, different combinations of instruments. He makes use of electronic instruments, the theremin famously, etc. And again, a lot of this is Wagner. Remember the Wagner tuba? He and other instruments. Wagner wanted to get the steer horns and Gerda Damerung. If you listen to the John Kulshaw ring recording, if you read his book, you realize ring resounding, you realize that there were a lot of sound effects in Wagner. Maybe he realized them, maybe he didn't. Harps going across the sonic image, 6 of them, um, in Rhine, at the end of Rheingold. Wagner had those sorts of things in mind. Film composers brought them in and of course, when you start adding stereo and sound effects, you can do even more of those. But Herrmann definitely did good things, interesting things with the orchestra here. I'm going to play the opening to Citizen Kane here, and it just gives you a sense. It's one of the weirdest film openings ever, because you're going to see Kane dying. So you see a couple of minutes, his great castle, going into his bedroom, but people wonder the mystery, the plot of Citizen Kane, such as it is. There's many things that go on here. Is the man dies, Charles Foster Kane saying, Rosebud, what is Rosebud? So we examine his life. Well, you learn when your ears are there what Herrmann does, and he will do this in a number of movies. He essentially lays down themes telling you how the movie is going. And what will happen in Citizen Kane, you're going to hear some weird instruments, some very low flutes. I believe they're bass flutes. You're going to hear a contrabass clarinet. You'll hear vibraphone. Again, all these sorts of different instruments playing to give you this mood. But in 30, 40 seconds, which is all I'm going to play, you're first going to hear the theme of Kane, his power. Very dark motive. But the first thing you hear sounds a whole lot like the Dies Irae. Dies Irae, da, da. So you know that. And then you're going to hear this rising figure, and that's the theme of Rosebud. And if you're wondering what Rosebud is, if you watch the movie, every time a certain object, I don't want to spoil it, shows up, you will hear it, or as Kane is seen thinking about his childhood, you will often hear that. Rosebud is going to take you back to different scenes. So again, it's telling you the story. Oops, sorry. So back to Citizen Kane. So just listening to that music, that sound is getting into your ear. You're hearing those themes that you are going to hear. They are going to really be developed throughout, always linking to previous scenes here. Bernard Herrmann, again, worked with Hitchcock beginning in the 1950s. They famously broke up in the early 60s, but produced some great scores. Herrmann, very Wagnerian here. What he tends to do is, Korngold might be writing sword fights and such, or Steiner could be, battle scenes or apes being hit by planes, etc., along with many other themes here. But Herrmann in the Hitchcock films is interested in psychological drama. People will say something and get a sense of the mood or who they are, and those sorts of themes are going to follow them here. So I think that's a lot like Wagner here. And he is not out. Korngold, I keep picking on Korngold. I don't mean to adore him. Tends to write longish melody. But what actually Herrmann does, he's going to write relatively short melodies, motifs, if you will. Not longish themes, not 8 bars of music. But he's going to take them. He may repeat them one after the other, too, but he will develop them. He may combine them as he goes, but he's going to write these motifs, and he is going to write very chromatically. So you almost don't know what key you're in. Sometimes he likes to go from one chord to the other. Sometimes you're close to atonality. Does that sound familiar here? This sort of flexibility here. And what Herrmann is famous for is his chords. Um, he will put a chord down, he'll move you to a melody. It's almost rather than trying to write melody, he's trying to write series of chords here to get the mood. And it's just fascinating to, look at the score of a piece of his, but typically unstable. Again, who else does this? You can think of Wagner, particularly in Tristan. It gets you that continuous music. It's not really resolved until it is going to be here. So, and Herrmann uses something called the Herrmann chord. There's different versions of this. I sat at a piano with one hand and a phone. It's not easy to do, I discovered, and be thinking about what you're doing here. But the Herrmann chord is you can take typically a triad is going to be the first, third, fifth note of the scale. And C, that would be C, E, and G. He'll take that. He'll take the third, he'll make it minor here. So you'll know a minor triad. And you could then top it off with the eighth note, the octave here, which would match the first. But he'll pull it down to the seventh. And when you do that, you get an unstable chord. You get a dark chord with the minor part, and the seventh is going to make it unstable. It wants to move somewhere else. And Herrmann will use these very often. What he'll do is he'll lay down the notes, he'll pull them into a chord. He'll play around with that chord. Maybe he'll have other notes coming in. But again, he's developing his themes and hitting you with them, bringing them back. So here's a little exposition. I apologize for the pianism. This note back. So you get, it's now a seventh chord. 1, 3, 5, 7. So an unstable chord. It's not entirely happy, it wants to go. But what Herrmann does, he makes his first part minor. So remember, top note. But then he brings it here to make it minor, major, jammed together, and makes it unstable. And that may sound familiar if you think of Psycho. Or if you take it one note at a time, one minor third, the fifth, and then the seventh. Major seventh. So here we go. Psycho, one at a time. That might sound suspiciously like Vertigo. And what Herrmann does then is actually does it in B flat. Anyway, one person, the Herman chord is famous. There's a lot of literature around it. It gets used a lot. Here, Sondheim loved Herman. He saw some scores, some movies that had Herman scores them when he was a kid. He loved it. And he would say Sweeney Todd is an homage to Herman. Like Bernard Herrmann, he's going to use that sort of chord frequently. And he is also going to essentially use leitmotifs. He's going to, if you know Sweeney Todd, there's a mystery here. He is going to lay down clues, if you will, that in the music that he will pull back at different points. And if you know what those clues are, um, you know the story. You may not know it though, but subconsciously you're picking up the associations. So one of his most famous movies here, Vertigo, it's probably second or third movie that he did. A Tale of Obsession, very complicated plot here. Herman, when you look at a list of great movies, when it used to be Citizen Kane, always seemed to be at the top of the list. Now Vertigo has moved on to the Sight and Sound list, the top. Here, what do they have in common? They both have a score by Bernard Herrmann. And both directors, Orson Welles, Alfred Hitchcock, would say much of the success of their movies um, can be attributed to the music because it really does set up the mood. And there are going to be scenes, and I'm thinking in particular about Vertigo, where there's relatively little dialogue. And you'll see this in some movies where that have a lot of themes. The orchestra tells the story. You see what's going on screen, but you're hearing themes that are taking you back, maybe giving you anticipation of what's coming to. But Vertigo is a tale of doomed love, and it opens up with a famous prelude here. Again, it's many of the themes of the movie, including a vertical theme where Jimmy Stewart is afraid of heights, and it's appropriate for the deceptions in Vertigo too, but you have a rising scale and you have a mirrored scale going against it when there's a scene when Jimmy Stewart is hanging by his fingers, he suffers from heights, and you just hear the harps going in different directions here. But this is going to remind you of a well-known opera written by Richard Wagner, one scene in particular. I'm going to take you just a little bit to the prelude, and again, he's laying down his themes. And with great music, you'll often hear it in concerts. But I want to take you just a little further ahead to what's absolutely amazing. So the story here, it's a very complicated story, but Jimmy Stewart has fallen, it's just fallen in love at this point with a young blonde lady. Um, she's found herself in San Francisco Bay. He's rescued her, brought her home, undressed her. She wakes up in bed. We will see that. And just as the scene begins, we hear a bit of music. And this is the indication he's fallen in love with her. And what this music is, rather interestingly, is, let's play it. It is the Tristan chord. It is that famous um, chord that you hear in Tristan that really becomes the basis of the rest of the opera, the theme of Tristan and Isolde throughout, except the notes have been changed in order, have been restacked, if you will, and then it's been raised up a couple of octaves. But it's that beginning of love. And then later, you're going to hear music straight out of the Liebestode, where the driver really it's Jimmy Stewart's obsessive love for a woman. She apparently dies, but comes back. We'll get there in a moment. Again, it's a strange plot, but. As I said, the plot of Vertigo is complex. This woman apparently dies, commits suicide. He then stumbles upon another woman who happens to be her, trying to deceive him. And he does his best to try to have this second woman, really the same, imitate the first, dress like her. He's just obsessed by her. And here she is, dressed and emerging. And what you will hear, music straight out of Tristan with the emphasis on Tristan's themes. And this is something, there's very little dialogue at this point. This music is essentially telling the story. And Hitchcock said that to Herrmann, that what do you need, how much time do you need for the scene? How are you going to do it? And he essentially shot the movie around the music. Might remind you of Tristan. Well, another movie he's going to do, he'll do North by Northwest, which is a lot of fun. But 1960 movies are changing. So Hitchcock decides to make a movie called Psycho from a novel. Studio doesn't want to make it. Hitchcock essentially makes a deal with him. He'll get 60% of the profits if they make it. He'll essentially forego his salary. He did well by this. The movie is, of course, very, very popular here. And Hitchcock wasn't very happy with the movie when it was actually coming together. He was thinking, because it's cheap, he's not going to have any music to it. He didn't like it, but then he called in Herrmann and said, tell me what you want to do. And Herrmann went away and said, I'll write an orchestral score. He was given a budget for it. Wasn't much of a budget. So he ended up writing all strings. And famously, it's a very unusual score in that respect, of course. Some of the best known music. And again, it's got all the good touches of Herrmann in a drama here, themes that you're going to hear early on that are going to develop, and not surprisingly, a couple of shocks along the way. I'm just going to play a little bit of the opening, certainly one of the most famous. And again, we could go through here. We could pick out, it's essentially a Norman Bates theme. There's a madness theme. There's a death theme. There's a murder theme, etc. All built into it that you're going to hear throughout the movie. So the opening. So not exactly relaxing music, very unstable driving, but very effective. And again, some of this music is going to come back. She's driving on along. This young lady has stolen some money here. She's going to go into the Bates Motel here. But you see her driving. If you didn't have this music behind you, you might just think she's taking a drive in the country. The music adding to it, being chased by the police. She makes her way to the Bates Motel. I think we know where this is going. And she chats with Norman Bates. And here he's talking about his mother, who we haven't seen here. But you're going to hear a theme, and it's called um, Madness or the Madhouse. And it's going to be one of the most important themes in Cycle, stated rather silently, and it's going to follow.
Become. I hate the illness.
Wouldn't it be better if you put her someplace?
You mean an institution? A madhouse? People always call a madhouse someplace, don't they? Put her in someplace.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to sound uncaring.
What do you know about caring? Have you ever seen the inside of...
So you hear that theme here, and what you've noticed, it's strings, and they're playing with mutes on them. There's no vibrato on them at all. It's, just kind of I won't call screechy sound. They're going to screech in the shower scene, of course. But it is a sound with no warmth. It's a very, very cold sound. Herrmann was truly a master of the orchestra. So, of course, you get to the famous shower scene. I think we know. But I want to take you to the end of the movie, when now Norman Bates has been captured, and we get to hear him. And the music, not surprisingly, we hear is music of madness, which we've been hearing that has been developed throughout. And Herrmann is going to do something really surprising here. He's going to lay down, you'll see what he does with his notes and how he ends, and I'll tell you.
It's sad when a mother has to speak the words that condemn her own son, but I couldn't allow them to believe that I would commit murder. They'll put him away now, as I should have, years ago. He was always bad, and in the end he intended to tell them I killed those girls and that man, as if I could do anything except just sit and stare, like one of his stuffed birds. Well, they know I can't even move a finger, and I won't. I'll just sit here and be quiet, just in case they do suspect me. They're probably watching me. Well, let them. Let them see what kind of a person I am. I'm not even going to swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see, and they'll know, and they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
What I have heard about this, you've been hearing the madness theme there, obviously, here. What you are getting is a Schoenbergian 12-tone row with the 12 notes of a chord, or 12 notes of the scale jammed together at the end. Not sure that's true, but well, music adds to film. Again, watch this scene without music. I'm just going to play a teeny bit of it because we know the music. Herrmann, when Hitchcock said, yes, Bernard, write some music for this, he said, but don't put any music in the shower scene, in the murder. That doesn't need it. And again, at this point, when Hitchcock was doing this, he wasn't even sure it was going to be a movie. He was thinking of just shortening it up and turning it into a TV. But then he saw the music, saw it with music, and he realized there was going to be a very good movie there. Scary, but add the music. So what happens to film music? Well, it turns out 50s and 60s, people are looking for popular songs. You get less of this orchestral, certainly less experimentation. You get things like James Bond theme, Pink Panther, etc., or popular songs, Breakfast at Tiffany's here. You'll get synthesizer, electronic instruments have been used here too coming in. Um, but what happens in the 1970s is movies are changing a bit. People like these disaster movies, action movies, here, science fiction movies here. And when you do these sorts of movies, the budgets get big. When you have a burning building, the Towering Inferno, for instance, you don't want a banjo playing or you don't want a violin and an oboe. You want a big orchestra. And there were certainly some big orchestral films out there, Lawrence of Arabia, a good example, but not so much. But they really came in the 70s, and famously, you got the theaters, you got the sound systems, and maybe one of the big films, Star Wars. But there were other films during the 70s too. So it's a good chance to introduce John Williams. John just turned 93. He had a piano concerto premiered at Tanglewood here. And one of his most famous pieces here, he's working with a relatively young director, very young director named Steven Spielberg. They've made one movie together. Reva's not well, not the Reva's, pardon me, Sugarland Express. But now he's going to make a movie called Jaws. And what kind of music do you write about it? Well, he came up with one of the great music themes, one of the simplest. And you talk about moment of remembrance, association. Watch this movie, if you can imagine, without much sound, and then imagine a group of swimmers out there, or people going into the beach, off the beach into the water, and in the distance you hear bum, 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 and it speeds up, speeds up, speeds up. You have fear. You know something is happening here. So let's just watch a little clip of Steven Spielberg talking about this theme.
John Williams all my life. And when he said yes to Sugarland, we became friends, and obviously I wanted him to do every picture I ever made, and Jaws came second. When he finally played the music for me on the piano, he previewed the main Jaws theme. I expected to hear something kind of weird and melodic, you know, and tonal but eerie and of another world, almost a bit like outer space, inside, you know, inner space, under the water. And what he played me instead with two fingers on the lower keys was dun, 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 dun. And at first I began to laugh. I thought he had a great sense of humor. He was putting me on. And he said, no, that's the theme to Jaws. And I said, play it again. He played it again, and he played it again, and it suddenly seemed right. And John found a signature for the entire movie.
And Spielberg and Williams would work together for almost 45 years. A good majority of Spielberg's films have scores by John Williams. It's about half of the 100+ scores he's written. Steven Spielberg introduced John Williams to another young director who was struggling. He had gotten financing to do something called Star Wars, had bounced from studio to studio. His idea was to follow Stanley Kubrick 2001, use original music. Spielberg said, talk to this film composer. The film composer, John Williams, said, you're better off writing themes. I can change them. I can adapt them. It was a wise move for a number of reasons, one of which those themes were then used in 9 movies over 40-odd years with John Williams. And he said he just developed a tremendous toolkit, just as Wagner did as he worked along, of themes that he would lay down. And then in these sorts of multiple movies or longish movies here, just like Wagner, it's a way of tying things together to make connections. So Star Wars, well known. I'll play a little bit. One of the things, one scene, famous scene, you're going to hear a lot of themes, and you're going to hear a big orchestra.
Use the Force, Luke. Let go, Luke.
The Force is strong in this one.
Luke, trust me.
His computer's on. Luke, you switched off your targeting computer. What's wrong?
Nothing. I'm all right. Rebel base in range.
You may fire when ready.
Commence primary ignition.
Have you now? What?
Yahoo! Look out! You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home. Stand by. Stand by.
Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
So a movie, certainly a big orchestral score played by the London Symphony, millions of copies sold. And this is what I think about film music. It is concert music for so many, many people. And John Williams he'll conduct the Boston Symphony for 14 years, the Boston Pops, and he'll get an award from Boston University that thanks him and other film composers for writing music in the style of Beethoven, Brahms, Wagner, and bringing music to people who haven't studied music, who won't study music. Hopefully it's a good gateway to music. Williams, when Star Wars came out, that well-known album, wrote a set of notes that were essentially themes. He didn't use the word leitmotifs, but that's what they were. Leitmotifs, as applied to Star Wars, incredibly well studied, as much as the Ring cycle, I would argue. Here's a document. I can send you a link to it, 70 pages here. The various themes are laid out here. You'll see the chords behind them. You'll see the movies that they're used in. You can then go get more information on each one of them here, but you can actually click on these numbers and go get film clips too. So another movie, very Wagnerian. You'd think in terms of the theme, Lord of the Rings, but really the scale scope. You had 3 movies. Howard Shore ended up writing about 10 hours of music for these. And you almost needed to, again, just to have a lot of characters, a lot of situations, and you get reference, and the music will change. A fellow named Doug Adams wrote a really good book about this, music journalist here, and he did a talk for the New York Wagner Society early in January 2025, Wagnerian Techniques in Film Scores, The Lord of the Rings. I'd love to see this next time I have a spare 13, 14 hours. Rather than listening to the Ring cycle, I might watch Lord of the Rings movies, the full versions. I'm just going to play a little bit of Lord of the Rings, and then we'll wrap up here. And maybe give you a bonus too, if you don't mind. Lord of the Rings, here's a nice analysis. It's a musicologist from England here, and he's going through some of the themes, and there are these different races, different groups of people, including dwarves, including elves, each one, and including men. Each one of them have their own basic theme. Instrumentation is going to be very, very different, which is appropriate for their history, etc. But here is a race of men, and you'll just see it. You'll see the notes of it. You'll hear how it's played, and you'll just see some of the way it's used throughout the movie.
On to
movie.
Rohan, home of the Horse Lords.
As the city of Rohan gradually rebuilds itself, Shaw lets the theme grow stronger and more heroic. Listen to how it turns for hopelessness. And now for strength. now military preparations.
And Rohan will answer. Muster the...
So I'll stop at that, but I think you get the idea. You have these basic themes and you hear them when people speak, the people themselves. You've got the association when they refer to people, refer abstractly to them, when people refer to their homes. And then, of course, the themes are going to blend together and develop as they go. So it's a great, great movie. Great example. Film music, I want to end by saying film music, it's alive and well. There's lots and lots of different film music there. There's no standard way of writing film music at all. A lot of orchestral scores. So these days, what you think might be an orchestra could actually be a synthesizer, where a composer sits at a keyboard and says, these are trumpets, these are trombones, and might say, what would happen if I put more trumpets in it, or if I move it up and down a few notes on the computer, push a button, boom, you can hear it, and you can even print out the parts to it. So it's pretty amazing here. Film music, it's free form. People write it to fit the scenes as they need to, and composers are amazingly versatile. We've heard some of that. John Williams would say they're chameleons. Remember, he wrote Jurassic Park, Schindler's List at the same time. Films that always, to my money, some of the most interesting films, fantasy, science fiction films here, just because they're unusual instruments, there's not what you expect, a little bit of weirdness to them. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, John Williams essentially wrote atonal music. And again, you're going to get all sorts of music pulling together in films here. One thing you're going to get, we heard this in like the Jaws theme is one, but a modern film, you might say, where's the music? And if you listen to a Hans Zimmer score, I'm thinking Dunkirk, you might say, I'm just hearing music or some sort of tone in the background, and maybe it's rising and then repeating itself. And that's ostinatos, repeating notes here. And these themes develop. And some people, they don't necessarily realize it, but many people. But when you talk about minimalism, putting down a set of notes and repeating them, you think of Philip Glass doing that. Very good film composer, by the way. But modern film composers, often with synthesizers, are going to take sounds, build themes that you're going to hear, and then repeat them. And they really, really get into your head. And Jeffrey Swan gave us a wonderful quote here. Another area of definite interest, this is in his afterword, that to my knowledge has never been studied carefully is the use of leitmotifs, certain leitmotifs. Here he's referring to The Ring as ostinato figures as a way to give a sense of continuity. Well, if Jeffrey has the time, he might want to look at film music. He could write an excellent, excellent book on the subject. And again, it can generate excitement through repetition. It can create transitions, etc. And that's what people are doing. So why should we be interested in film music here? Well, to my money, when people say Wagner was very influential in music and opera, maybe he was, but there really isn't that much music and opera to listen to in the concert hall, in the opera house. Or at least most of us are listening to here. But people are listening to film music. And for me, film music is the concert music of the 20th century. There's a huge amount of it. We can access it easily. We can get the films. We can get, obviously, streaming, but, CDs. A lot of it has been recorded now. And there's some great websites that stir here. But I think film music really is influenced by classical composers. Certainly, you can think Tchaikovsky and others, but not just using their music, but the style of music. And I think, at the very head of the list is Richard Wagner. And subconsciously or not, people are using Wagner. Why are they using him? Or why does Wagner fit? Because he was a dramatic composer. He believed in opera and also in orchestral music, a story can be told. That the orchestra has a major part in the opera or standalone to tell the story. That's what movies are doing here. Those moment of memories. You will get interesting music. You'll get concert music. It's your chance to hear concert music that people aren't listening to necessarily. It's good music, and you put it in a film, and people like it, but they may not be listening to Bartok and Ives otherwise. Here, they certainly weren't here. I think film music, it's well written. Technically, it's interesting. There's some very good analysis there. Vertigo has some great analyses behind it. And I think it works best. It's like a lot of music. It's good to know where does it come from. You put in the dramatic context. You know the story behind even on an orchestral tone poem, but you can listen to it alone. It's even better when you know where it comes from, and even best when you watch it with the movie here. A lot of these film composers, I'm thinking Bernard Herrmann, Waxman are two good examples. John Williams, too, have written music outside of film. Morricone, really, and Nino Rota, who gave us The Godfather. These are all classically trained composers who have written all sorts of, music. Williams, for instance, wrote a very good violin concerto upon the death of his wife. She was in her 40s back then, he too, here. And this is music people are listening to. So formally, my talk stops with this. But what I'd love to do is just to give you a little bit of a bonus here that I think you'll enjoy here. John Williams, as I said, still with us 93, 5 years ago, just as COVID was starting. He is a fine conductor. He can sell out a house coming to it. He was able to conduct two great orchestras. First one, the Vienna Philharmonic, second one, Berlin Philharmonic, not too shabby. And he came, and at the Vienna Philharmonic, you'll see, it's not your usual very quiet audience, straight-laced. They're very, very excited to have John Williams there. And the orchestra had asked him to play a certain piece. I think you're going to recognize it. It represents the Imperial forces. First movie didn't have a very good theme. The second one did, and it's going actually iconic, just becomes very, very famous. And what's wonderful about this, one, I always like to see an orchestra playing anything. You get the visuals of it here. But this is the sort of orchestra that the early film composers knew. They had conducted, they had worked with it, etc. And these musicians who play Strauss, Wagner, Mahler, Strauss, other composers, know that sort of music well. And when they play film music, they play it very, very well. This recording, I think, is precious. I love looking at John Williams' reaction. And again, he played this at the request of the orchestra. So enjoy, and then we'll finish. Well, I think you can say that music fits. Vienna Philharmonic plays it well, and it looks like the good time was had by all, John Williams included. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the Wagner Society, and I just want to thank all the people who write great film music. So thank you very much.